Welcome friends. This module is the final module linking with the earlier two modules where we have discussed about the basic concept of microplanning, which is related to development and the typology of the region. We have already discussed what is the relevance of microplanning, especially in the context of 21st century, in the context of improving the quality of human life, climate change, and so on. In the second module, we have given you a little bit introducing the idea of settlement, which means that whenever you plan, you have to think about the space, about the geography, and the location allocation decisions are ultimately taken at a particular place. That's why the whole idea, which was developed by various geographers and later on regional economists as well as the development economists, basically we analyzed the central place theory, and then we also gave you a unique idea about the growth pole approach, because how these two things are linked, that the economic activity which is located at a particular node, that node could play a role of the central place. And there are a lot of core periphery model can be used in positive sense, can be used in negative sense. But whenever you think in terms of development, regional development, decentralized development, you have to take care of these two dimensions: the centrality as well as the nodality. And there is, in the history of development, there is a lot of debate on this particular issue. But our aim is not just to talk about theory, but more importantly, in this module, we will talk about various participatory processes. We will talk about that how actually this regional delineation has been done. What are the practicalities which are associated with delineation of a particular planning region? So which means that we have to identify a spatial label for microplanning, and microplanning cannot be done in the air. You need certain institutional structures. Those structures need capacities to really conduct the microplanning processes. And all these things I and you can contextualize in your own situation. Many of our Indian students may like to see the context, the Indian context, in understanding the whole process of microplanning. As I have already submitted, that this whole idea of decentralized development, microplanning, participatory development, you will find huge literature in the area of development economics, in the area of political economy, in the area of governance, in the area of public administration. And in every country, whether it is developed country, whether it is underdeveloped country, this whole idea of participatory development is very important. And before we talk about some of the practices and theoretical dimension of the microplanning processes, by giving the case studies from India, you must understand, since you are very innovative, you have big dreams in terms of your own vision, in terms of your own objectives of life, And moreover, even at the postgraduate level, and many of you might be interested to conduct various kinds of research projects, dissertation, or may like to follow this whole idea into their research projects, into their research activities at the MPhil level, at the PhD level. So the understanding of these modules will really help you to really conduct action-based research or any kind of research in a way which is relevant in the context of development. And under the present scenario, when the social development goals have already been identified, and interestingly, the diplomacy and the political economy of this whole development is very unique. The UN General Assembly long back in 2000 identified Millennium Development Goal. And it was expected that by 2015, all the countries will be able to achieve those Millennium Development Goals. Ultimately, the Millennium Development Goals are nothing but livelihood, health and education, the whole idea of human development, on which we have already given you a lot of academic input. Now the Millennium Development Goals, which are supposed to be achieved by 2015 and for which majority of the nation states were the signatory to that particular document, but we could not achieve, which means that there are certain fundamentals which are being ignored, which are not being taken into consideration. And accordingly, it was compelled the UN General Assembly to adopt a new resolution in 2015 and shifted the goals from 2015 to 2030. And the goal shifting in itself is an indication of the importance of micro planning. This is my understanding. You can argue, you can, in that interactive manner, you can submit your arguments that whatsoever I am saying is not the reality, and we can have a lot of discussion on that. But because these goals are not being achieved, I'm not talking about defense, I'm only talking about some of the fundamental requirements of ensuring the quality of human life. I'm talking about employment, I'm talking about livelihood, I'm talking about health issues, I'm talking about gender equity, I'm talking about the quality of education, the educational accessibility, retention, quality, participation. All these things matters, and I can say in the era of ICT revolution, where we talk about digital dividends, this whole process of microplanning has become more important and has become more easy because of the ICT revolution. So with this idea that you as a learner must keep in your mind, in this particular module, we will talk about, just reiterate as you have already seen in a different paper about the planning processes, but I simply re-emphasize various stages of planning processes, and we will talk about the various lessons which are drawn on understanding what should be the appropriate label for microplanning. So first is we will talk about the planning process. Second is we will talk about whichever is the spatial label, the village label, the cluster of villages, the block label, the district label, or even inter-district, or even a state. What is the level of microplanning? Because microplanning as such, if it is not specially defined, it is a very flexible, or rather than I can say a vague concept. And we will talk about all these things, ensuring that whenever you talk about microplanning, it should be inclusive. Whenever you talk about microplanning, it should be participatory, it should be decentralized. There are democratic processes, and the integrated area development process must be done. So we will give you the exact case studies based on the Indian experience. Then we will talk about what are the structural elements of microplanning, because we have to implement microplanning. So what would be the structural components? Like, what should be the bodies? Whether it should be done by simply a development department headed by a bureaucrat, or whether it should be done by some NGOs, or whether it should be done by some of the the government size, that we'll talk about. And next we will just talk about how the whole processes of microplanning is being done. What we say that process-based microplanning, how to define the processes, like how to ensure inclusiveness, participation, and all those factors in the process of developing microplans. And then we'll also talk about the process of documentation, because ultimately, suppose you are a regional planner, suppose you are a very eminent economist who is working at the grassroots level, and then you have been asked to develop a microplan. So what would be the proposed content of the microplanning, different chapters of the microplanning or microplan document? That will really a very unique journey to understand, and this journey is going to culminate. Now, after understanding this, we will be talking about by giving a few case studies within the human development section. We will give you a few case studies: livelihood sector case study, health sector case study, and education sector case study based on the real life example. And then at the end, we will talk about the not only sum, we will sum the whole discussion, we'll summarize the whole discussion, but we will, I as a learner in development economics, I may provoke you to really conduct a few case studies, a few dissertation, a few research areas, and this is going to be a way forward, so that whatsoever theoretical framework we are learning, that can be understood properly. So moreover, in this whole process, our journey will start from the day of independence of India, because we are talking about Indian case study, say start of the first 5-year plan in 1951, and we will continue it up to the finalization of the strategic paper given by the Niti Ayog. This is a new buzzword which has been talked in the context of Indian development about ensuring the whole process of development. And even in the Indian context, the Gazette notification, which talks about development of the people, of village development, of microplanning development, it specifically talks about the development of credible plans. Credible plans, and how these credible plans are going to be developed, which are being proposed by the Niti Ayog in one of their very important objectives we'll talk about. So what I'm saying that the forthcoming discussion will help you in a very practical sense, as a hands-out sense, how this whole learning is to be comprehended, keeping in view the realities which are around you. Whether you are living in a coastal area, whether you are living in a mountain area, whether you are living in an urban area, there is no problem. You can think about and you can experiment with this idea. That is the beauty of economic science. So what we are doing, we are blending the theoretical framework with the practice, and from practice to theory. I think it would be best that when you link the practice with the theory, and in that sense, it will really help you out. Okay, now first we will be talking about the stages of the micro planning. Now I will quickly go through it. As you see in the diagram, first what you do, you as an expert in development economics, or as an expert in regional planning, or as a development administrator, you formulate a document, because that document formulation is called the process of identifying various aspects. So this proper documentation where you collect all the information is called the formulation of a plan, right? Which means that when you formulate a plan, what you do, you survey an area, you collect the data, you analyze the data, then you identify your objectives of your plan, then you talk about the kind of strategies which are left for you, the kind of approaches that you want to adopt to achieve the objectives. Then you talk about various kinds of new interventions. You remember, in this whole planning process, you have to decide a suitable location allocation function. You have to take suitable location allocation decision. And then you talk about whether the finance is available or not. And if the finance is available, how much finance is your own finance, how much finance you are getting from people, and how you are mobilizing the resources in and around. So this is a very beautiful, a very unique, a very creative journey, which starts from formulation of the micro plan. Next is that when you prepare a document is prepared by a team. Then you submit to the document to a particular government, right? Any government, it could be provincial government, whatsoever are the rules of the game. And the government, the people's representatives, they just think about, they discuss the document and they adopt the document. So adoption means your government is accepting the document, and this document is now going to be, the third stage comes, implemented. Because ultimately you will say, okay, this is industrial aspect, this is agricultural aspect, this is infrastructure aspect. So there are various sectors, and within those sectors the plan is going to be implemented. Now there are implementing agencies. Take one example. You want to implement, say, health or education or even the livelihood programs. Now you have different departments or different sections, and they implement. Now this process is already rolling on in a time series. Now when you are implementing, you have a document called micro plan document. Now on the basis of that document, there are certain parameters which says that these are the indicators which shows that the plan is being implemented in a systematic manner. So next aspect is, as you see in this figure, is the monitoring. So you yourself as implementing agency monitor whether you are going in the right direction or you are deviating from that right direction, so that, because whenever you talk about plan, there is a particular time frame. You may have 1 year time, you may have 5 year times. So generally it happens that first you talk about perspective plan. Generally the perspective plan is made or is formulated for, say, 4 years, in some country 5 years, in some country 7 years. Like in India, our 5-year plan is a kind of mid-term plan, but this 5-year plan is done keeping in view the perspective of 10 years or 20 years. But generally we can say there is a perspective document, where things are very broad and all these perspectives are put into the annual plan. So you have 1 year, you have say 5 year, you have say 20 years. So 1 year is ultimately achieving 5 years and 5 years are achieving 20 years, which means that your vision should be very clear. And that whole visioning exercise is very important. Now, the plan period is over. Okay, suppose 1 year is over. Suppose 5 years are over. Then what you do? You or the competent authority or the government asks a third party, like say some research organization or maybe your university, to evaluate the plan. So this is called the evaluation. So your evaluation is generally, for convenience sake, I am saying evaluation is done by the third party, whereas monitoring is done by the implementing agency. That is the basic difference that you can understand. So evaluation, on the basis of evaluation, what we get? We get lot of lessons. We able to know that what are the errors that we committed in the process, because there is nothing which can be taken as a big bang, that in one shot everything is okay. It cannot happen. There are incremental models of development and that happens everywhere. So you understood from your failure, you understood from your success stories, and this whole thing is ultimately reviewed. All the third party people, your government people, your experiment, your expert groups, they just sit together and review. Okay, next year, the plan document should be done in a manner, and you see this whole plan cycle again goes to next year. So you formulate, you implement, monitor and evaluate, and that whole review goes on. And in this whole process, the data collection, the analysis of the situation, and then thinking about different strategic choices, then thinking about your finance, and the whole issue. When you talk about finance, you are mobilizing resources, you are allocating resources, and you are generating resources. So resources are generated when you create some certain livelihood activities, employment, income activities. These are being mobilized through various taxes and other things. And then ultimately when you have money, you just allocate. So this is in a nutshell the what you call the stages of planning. Now, next dimension is the identification of a particular label, a spatial label for micro planning. Now, this is a very interesting and very challenging story, and you can think about this, you can link this whole idea with the centrality approach and with the growth pole approach. Okay, now focus on the practical dimension. Actually, how it has happened in the Indian context. Now, the spatial label to identify a particular planning unit so that you can take most appropriate location allocation decision to maximize the social and economic output. In India, it's a very interesting debate. And that debate is linked with identifying a suitable structure within that particular spatial label and identifying various processes. That we'll talk about, but here, within the spatial unit, okay, for all practical purpose, if you see around in any country, but specifically in the context of India, you see the basic unit is a village, okay? It is in the rural sector, village. Now, as you see, the village, little go up, then there is a cluster of village. There are different names in India. Like if you see Andhra, I'm just giving you a few examples, like Andhra, like in Uttar Pradesh, there are different nomenclature for that. Okay, now over and above, there is a very important spatial level called the community development block. You remember when we got independence, so some of the experts, they came, and there was a very unique experiment which was related to development, because that was the major challenge before the government, before the central and provincial government, how to ensure grassroots development. And then that idea came that between a village and a district, there is a very unique dimension, and that dimension was identified as a community development block. Now, the community development block, there are a lot of material, and there was a very unique experiment which was done in Uttar Pradesh state that time. It is called Itawa experiment, where it was made a successful experiment which tells that community development block is one very important spatial area where you can implement the decision for decentralized development. Over and above the community development block, and it is the district. Many times you just talk about micro planning when you aggregate a few districts.